Good morning and welcome to our webinar. Today's topic is caring for yourself while helping others, and we thank you for joining us today. These complimentary webinars are brought to you through a collaboration of sponsorship with O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, as well as Alzheimer's Orange County. My name is Kim Bailey, and I'm a gerontologist here at Alzheimer's Orange County, and I'll be your host today. Our sponsors are providing these monthly topics to you as a service to the community. And these are topics that are beneficial for anyone who cares for and works with older adults. We hope that you'll find today's presentation informative and useful, and I feel confident that you will. We have one of our most popular speakers returning to our webinar series today, and her name is Becky Lamaka, wonderful speaker. And she is the amazing Becky Lamaka. She's the Director of Grief Support and Education at O'Connor Mortuary. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, master's in counseling psychology, and a certification in thanatology. Becky is an expert in the field of death and bereavement with 2 decades in nonprofit senior care before joining O'Connor Mortuary in 2013. Becky serves on the board of directors for the Association for Death Education and Counseling. That's the international professional organization that's dedicated to promoting excellence and recognizing diversity in death education, care of the dying, grief counseling, and research in thanatology. She also serves on the Trust Institute Committee for Selected Independent Educational Trust, whose focus is to bridge the educational gap between mortuary science school and on-the-job training. Locally, she serves on the board of directors for Newport Mesa Irvine Interfaith Council, the advisory council for the Trauma Intervention Program, and is past board chair for Hearts and Hope Family Grief Center. Becky is passionate about educating the community on how to cope with death and the journey of grief after loss. Her true passion lies in normalizing the grief experience and helping to create a world in which grief is embraced, understood, and respected. And to go along with all of that, she's also an expert in caring for oneself as we provide this hands-on important care for others. And so that is going to be her topic today. And with that, I'm going to invite Becky to join us. Thank you for being here, Becky.
Thanks, Kim. Happy New Year to everyone. And we have a lot to cover today, so we are going to get right into it. As Kim said, we'll have opportunity for question and answer afterwards. Here are our objectives for today. I don't want to necessarily read through these, but what I do want to do is get us present for today's topic, and some things for you to think about as we go through these slides, as we share in this conversation, remembering that each of us on this webinar today, we are all human beings dealing with the same issues as the people that we are helping. So it may not be the exact same issue, but we're all experiencing issues. We're all experiencing our own personal stuff while we're in this profession of caring for others. So keeping that in mind as we move forward. And then some of the things we'll be talking about is how do we bring ourselves fully into this relationship with the people we are serving, bringing ourselves into the relationship physically, emotionally, cognitively, spiritually, and finding that grounding for ourselves so that we have the ability and the strength and the stamina to immerse ourselves in that other person. One of the ways I like to phrase it is we are with and for the people that we are working with. So I want to start with carrying on conversations. and not necessarily so much about the conversations and how it is affecting the people we are caring for, but examining how our conversations and our language affects us personally. So we each have our own attitudes and beliefs surrounding end of life, surrounding illness, surrounding death, our personal beliefs, our cultural beliefs, social, spiritual beliefs, all lead into these attitudes that are attached to our own human emotion. So we really need to be aware of our attitude toward these conversations that we're having with our patients, with our families, with our clients. You know, a lot of us lack this confidence in our communication ability when it is surrounding these more sensitive topics. And our attitude is sometimes just that one more intervention, and we actually may have some opposing thoughts and some opposing beliefs that differ from what our family, our client, our patient is telling us or is wanting. So being open to examining our own personal beliefs. And then how do we get more comfortable with having these difficult conversations? Well, a few things to think about is first of all, we can't fix family systems that were broken before our interaction with this client or with this patient. Sometimes there are long-standing family dynamics that are broken before this situation that they're in with you. And then being aware of the family's cultural context. And I always say to people, it's okay to ask. If you're not familiar with their cultural context, I've rarely had a family who said, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're asking me this. I don't want to talk about this. Typically, it's the opposite. I want to share. I want to tell you more. And then talking with families about their history, their future, and their fears. I like to paraphrase and I like to ask open-ended questions that start with who, what, when, and where. And I tend to avoid asking why, because that can come across as judgmental. And then, of course, our nonverbal communication, our eye contact, our listening to understand our body language. So those things focusing on the person, the family, the client who is in front of us, while at the same time really examining our own personal belief systems. And then, of course, fixing boundaries in advance. It's really important for all of us in a caring profession to really set good protective boundaries for ourselves as a professional. I think most of these go unsaid, but one thing that I do want to mention is sometimes we have a client or we have a situation that hits a little too close to home. Maybe the family dynamic mirrors something that we're going through. Maybe the illness mirrors something that we are currently experiencing. So being aware of those personal issues that may hit a little too close to home and having a healthy way to process that, or maybe even asking a colleague to take over and you step out of that situation and have someone else step in. So what can we do? How do we model good self-care? Well, we talked a little bit about it. We talked about being aware of our own personal issues and having a healthy way, or we'll talk a little bit more about strategies to develop ways to cope with our own issues. Giving ourselves grace and accepting the fact that we are not immune to illness. We are not immune to trauma. We are not immune to loss. So giving ourselves permission to grieve. We have the same processes and experiences as our clients, families, patients do. So making the connection and owning it and realizing that it's okay. We can compartmentalize, but it's okay if some of these things affect us. And especially when we talk a little bit more about burnout and compassion fatigue, We'll talk a little bit about these parallel narratives and how we can lean into how this affects us. And then how do we apply our knowledge to best support the people that we are caring for? Brene Brown, who is a licensed medical social worker and researcher at University of Houston. She has written multiple books. I think most people are very well aware of Brene. She has spent the last almost 2 decades now studying vulnerability, courage, worthiness, and shame. And the lesson learned is really that acknowledgement. We need to allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to be comfortable in doing so. So before we move on to the next slide, I just want to help us set the frame for this. And I will be vulnerable with you. Over the past year, as much as I practice mindfulness, as much as I try to give myself permission to grieve, to feel all of the good things, as much as I model good self-care for the families that I'm caring for, there were points of this year where I really felt depleted, and I was experiencing some empathy fatigue. I had moments when I found myself feeling a little apathy, feeling some anger toward the work that I do, and just feeling tired. So here are a few symptoms of my fatigue that I recognized: some anger, lowered resistance to illnesses. I found myself, I typically am pretty healthy and avoid getting sick. I had a couple of incidents where I was down for the count for a couple of weeks with some colds, some insomnia, waking up in the middle of the night, my mind just racing, and then a little bit of an emotional detachment too. Like, gosh, I'm just like, my heart isn't into it like it used to be. So what I did is I took some classes too. I talked with some of my colleagues, and somebody who really helped me is a colleague of mine, Dr. Andy Ho, who is the associate professor over at a university in Singapore. And he reminded me that taking time to replenish myself is the key to my work in caring for others. And it's that proverbial, you have to put your mask on first idea. So there were little things that I did that tweaked my day that really helped me find the joy in caring for others again. So I'm going to go through some definitions, and I'm not going to read these definitions for you. You all have the slides, but I want to talk about some things that people may be experiencing. The first one is compassion fatigue, and just this state of exhaustion and this dysfunction, both psychologically and physically, that can happen as a result of prolonged exposure to compassion stress. And then the second definition is secondary traumatic stress disorder, almost like a post-traumatic stress disorder where exposure to traumatized person, it's that exposure to the traumatized person versus that trauma event itself that kind of starts eating away with you as the helping professional. And then vicarious traumatization, that's where as a therapist or as somebody in the helping profession, a trauma worker, you take on that trauma of the person that you're assisting and that you're helping. And then burnout. I think all of us, we think about burnout, just that cluster of various symptoms that reduces our work performance, makes us feel more exhausted, both physically and mentally. And again, is brought about by the cumulative stress and frustration of the feeling of powerlessness in achieving our work goals. And I think that's a really key phrase. But I want to spend most of our time on this last definition. And this definition is compassion satisfaction. And I'm going to read this, and I want you to read this. the pleasure derived from the feeling of doing one's caregiving work well. Compassion, satisfaction, and that's what each of us wants to experience each and every day that we go in to do our jobs. Compassion, satisfaction. How do I gain joy, gain pleasure, gain strength out of the work that I do? So the roots of compassion fatigue. I'm going to ask you to type some things into the chat box here. I'm going to read you a scenario of a woman named Nancy. So Nancy is 36 years old. She is a single mother of 2 middle school boys. She's been divorced for about 11 years when her boys were toddlers. And when she got divorced, she decided she wanted to go back to nursing school. So with the help of her parents, she returned to school, got her nursing degree. For the last 8 years, she has been working both in hospice and acute care settings and always has felt immense satisfaction in her work. But lately, she's confided in you that she just isn't feeling her old self. The spark isn't there anymore. Patients are sicker and more demanding than ever. Their families are impossible. And her supervisor, she just can't please that woman. And then she tells you with all the cutbacks, she knows she should be grateful to have a job. She can't afford to quit, but there are honestly some days when she wishes she would just get a nice fat severance check so she would have reason to leave her work behind. In the chat, just take a couple of minutes to tell me some of the symptoms that Nancy is experiencing. Compassion fatigue, burnout, burnout, frustration, anger, financial challenges, overwhelmed, exhausted, anxiety, disengagement, helplessness, unappreciated, frustration, sleep disturbances, sadness, resentment, disappreciated, loss of interest in enjoying her job, fatigue, sorrow, hopeless, unmotivated, depression, needs a vacation, competing demands, unsupported, great, lack of time off, needs a margarita, I like that, Michael. Overwhelmed, great, wonderful. So we're getting this. You have lack of time for yourselves, life imbalance, wonderful, wonderful. So yeah, you all are recognizing these symptoms that are at the roots of compassion fatigue. So recognizing these symptoms, all of these things that you all recognize. So anger, that like, just get out of my face, right? Cynicism, doesn't really matter anymore. This apathy, I just don't care. I don't care. Lower resistance to disease or illness, something that I talked about that affected me personally. Increase, maybe sometimes the increased need to relax type of habits, like, oh, I'm going to go home, that margarita, right? I'm going to have one margarita, needs a margarita, or then maybe I need 2 margaritas, or I need 3 margaritas. So habits like tobacco and alcohol. Sensing this, I'm feeling trapped in my job. This conscious resistance to, or reluctance to deal with the patients, the residents, the families. You know what? I don't want to deal with this. Can I pass this off to somebody else? Maybe some increased insomnia. I'm just not able to fall asleep, or I'm waking up. And then this emotional distance or detachment from others. And I think you all hit all of these on the head. So how do we combat this? How do we combat this compassion fatigue, this burnout, this stress that we're experiencing by learning how to care for ourselves? Well, The best way we can do this is to reestablish our call for helping others. And I know it can sound counterintuitive that by jumping back into what is actually burning us out, which is what is causing our compassion fatigue, is actually it will be what helps us out of it. But studies are finding that it's not the work that we do, it's the other contributing factors that are causing this burnout and this compassion fatigue. So taking time to reestablish your calling, what hour, why did you get into this? What are your priorities? What are your long and short-term goals? And we'll get more into finding this life of balance and what that means for you. Working to achieve a life of balance, and then creating a support network. We're going to talk about building in accountability when you create your individual plan. And then lastly, expressing gratitude daily. There are so many studies, and I talk a lot about this with my families who are grieving, that you can find joy and pain, joy and grief at the same time. It's not an either or, it's a yes and. So expressing that gratitude daily. Let's talk about how we can put this plan into place. So stress. Everybody thinks of stress when we think about burnout, when we think about compassion fatigue. I want you to reframe how you think about stress. So we have this bad stress, right? Things, oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming and it's causing these symptoms that we talked about a couple of slides back. But what I want you to think about is good stress. When are times in your life that stress isn't always bad? I'll tell you, for me, one of my good stresses is doing presentations like this. I prepare, I work toward, getting my slides in place, getting my outline done. But I get a little stressed when, everybody calls and says, oh, you have 400 people on this. Oh my gosh, that's a little, but it's a good stress. It energizes me, right? It energizes me. So think about the things that are good stress for you. Some examples of good stress: change. I think of my children and where they are in their lives. They're transitioning from high school into college, from college into their first career jobs. And it's stressful, but it's good stress. That change can produce good stress for us. Being a beginner at something, right? I don't have all of the answers to this, but boy, it's a little bit of exciting to try to figure this out. Things that are meaningful for you, those are good stressors, but they do not make you feel afraid or uncomfortable. So think about that when you think about stress. Sometimes we perceive a stressful situation as an opportunity that will lead to a good outcome versus a bad outcome. So we want to focus on our own key priorities so that we balance out those stressors and use our positive stress to motivate us. That in turn balances out that negative stress that causes us anxiety and fear. So one of the ways that we do this is connecting to our mission, our values, and our time resources. So how do we find our personal key priorities? Well, one of the things that I like to do is I like to look at how I respond and adapt to things that are potentially life-altering events, threatening events, stressful events, or processes in my life. And then I want to look at how in control do I feel of this in this situation? And then do I have people I can turn to? So those three things: how threatening is this, and how do I respond to this threat? How in control do I feel? And then who is my support system as I'm going through this life event, this work event, or this process? And then through that, I'm developing my mission and purpose in life and finding out, is it clear to me? And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about is it clear to me and has it changed? So this is just a little sheet that you can use to create this, this meaning and value. So meaning making, it's the process of how we construe and understand and make sense of our life events, our relationship, and ourself. And then values are the things each of us believes are important in the way we live and in the way we work. So basically, it's just a ranking. Our personal values coincide with our meaning making. And that is what determine our priorities. And when value and meaning are aligned, that's usually when life is good. So my service to others is one of my top values. And for me, it coincides with the work I do in grief support and education. When those two are aligned, when that value and that meaning is aligned, my life is good. I'm feeling good. I might have stressors, but those are good stressors that energize me. So I'm ranking, and this is very fluid, right? This can change. It can be within the month, it could be within the week, it certainly is within the year. So I say to people, keep this, write it in pencil or make copies of it, and review this every so often. Define and rank your values and see how they coincide with meaning making, and see what is important to you. And it's okay that things that may be important to you in the past may not be as relevant now. And then this is something that is not new. This is something that Stephen Covey put in his book back in 1994, the Covey Leadership Center. And this is really about, he looks at this, it's the same idea of that meaning making and value, but he puts these into quadrants of urgent, not urgent, important, not important. So our goal is to live by priorities every day. It can challenge us. We all have moments of what we call wasting time, which can sometimes be very healthy for us to have some downtime and turn off our brains. We all have moments of crisis. We all have moments of deception, but the goal is to strive to be in quadrant 2 as much as we can. And I will say the goal is to strive to be in that quadrant as much as we can. I know people sometimes have gotten really down on themselves because they feel like they're not always in that quadrant. That isn't realistic. We're not always going to live in quadrant 2. That is life, right? That is especially the life of our fast-paced world of caring for others. But again, this is something that you can do on your own time, looking at what is important and non-urgent, important, urgent. Look through these quadrants and find ways when we're developing our self-care plan, how we can spend more of our time in quadrant 2. Yeah, I'll go back to that real quick. So quadrant 2, we want to have this quadrant of quality and of personal leadership. So creating our personal self-care strategy. I have some ideas up here. You can read these, do one thing, not everything. I think especially this time of year, right? We start out the year, we're 2 weeks in, 1 week into the new year, and we are ready to take on the world. And then by about March, we're like, oh my gosh, why did I plan so much? Why did this happen? So, doing one thing and not everything, building an accountability. Who's got your back? Who's going to do this with you? Involve your staff, coworkers, and together work on self-care strategies. They don't have to all be the same, but you can ability. And I think the great thing, especially for those and leading caregivers, other people who are caring for others, this is a great thing to do as a team. We don't have to connect, or we don't have to necessarily share every detail, but we can set a time to do this together. One thing I did want to talk about creating this self-care strategy too, idea of parallel narratives. So, for example, a lot of times we can find fault, we can find blame, this is my responsibility, this is all my fault. And even sometimes if we know it's irrational, we'll put this narrative onto ourselves and we'll say, this is all me. This is my fault. I'm creating this myself. And then what we try to do to get rid of that is we try to completely push that away and get it out of our heads. Kind of like this good stress, bad stress that we talked about a few slides back. I want you to think about parallel narratives versus only a positive or only a negative narrative, allowing yourself, rather than to replace that negative narrative, is to listen to your story. And instead of trying to replace it, embrace it. Use mindfulness and intention to then find the parallel narrative to that, the gratefulness, the love, the compassion for yourself, being charitable to yourself, finding joy, even though that part of you doesn't want it. So it's okay to live with the experience for a little while, but don't shortcut your way through it. So the best outcomes are being able to do both, living and kind of like that joy and yes and versus even or. One other thing that helps us with our personal self-care strategy is the practice of keeping up. So that's continuing to grow in our practice, continuing to grow intellectually. And these are some of the things that benefit when you practice keeping up, with world events, in your cognitive capacity, in your field. Are you attending webinars like this? Are you subscribing to journals? Are you meeting with colleagues to keep up on the latest research, reviewing books? Are you attending conferences? Maybe you're able to write articles or papers, or read articles or papers. Have that mentor in your life. So how we keep up. A supervision or peer group. I am fortunate to belong to one supervision group with Dr. Bill Warden, and then a couple of peer groups. Those are my people that I can go to. And these are people outside of my personal life. My personal life, I feel like I have a wonderful support group. I have loving, well-meaning family and friends, but they don't always get my life as this caregiving professional. So who do you have in your life that you can form this peer support group, or you can find that mentor to talk about things that maybe your outside of work support group just doesn't quite understand. Attending continuing education conferences like you're doing right now. Being a part of a relevant association to the work you do, keeping up on current literature, communicating to others what you learn. Can you go back and do an in-service for your team? Can you lead your team in something? And then visioning future plans and programs. And interestingly, this very thing of how we keep up really goes back to that examining our purpose and examining why we do what we do and why we got into what we are doing. And then, of course, part of our plan is attending to our physical well-being. So we all know the benefits of stress reduction on our well-being. I think as much as we know it, this sometimes can be the hardest thing for us to do, right? Sometimes, especially when we look at those stressors very early on, when we were talking about Nancy, the nurse, we see some of these things. And this is easy to say, yes, I get it. I need to move my body. I need to eat well. I need to get enough sleep. I need to do all of these things. But these are some of the very things that are hardest for us as healthcare and caregiving professionals to do. I grew up in the state of Michigan, so of course, my family was glued to the TV last night. University of Michigan, where right outside of where I grew up, was in the national championship playoff game, and they won the national championship, and we're all thrilled. They did a very interesting story on the quarterback of University of Michigan, JJ McCarthy, and he focuses, since he's been a high school football player, on his physical and emotional well-being. He has a very specific mantra that he goes through before each and every one of his games. He has a mindfulness coach that he works with. So these things, it's easy to say, yes, these are important. And we're going to talk a little bit more detail about how we actually get ourselves to do things. And one of the key things is something a couple of slides back, where we pick one thing. We pick one thing and not everything. Maybe it's trying to get a little less sugar into our diet. Maybe it's, I'm going to stand up from my desk and walk around. And then realizing how important rest and sleep and relaxation is. And then a sense of humor. We all need that sense of humor. So at the very beginning of our talk today, I talked about being there with and for our clients. And the only way we can really do that is to attend to our own well-being. Presence replaces fixing. We can't fix, and many of us who are in end-of-life care and senior care, we can't fix the things that we are caring for. Presence replaces fixing. And knowing it can touch the people that we are caring for in such a profound way. And for us to be present, we have to feel self-compassion. We have to practice self-compassion. We have to practice caring for ourselves. So developing our emotional self. We've been developing our emotional language since before we could even talk. Since our infancy, since we were babies, we've learned how to express our feelings toward events in our lives. And as we grow, we learn to read cues that indicate other people's feelings. So as adults, we can shift that and feel the need to be happy and content at all times. So stronger mental health is correlated with experiencing a range of emotions. And I talk with this about all the time with my grieving families. Feeling all of the feelings, right? We do that as babies, we do that as children, and then over time, we start to lose this, and we have this notion that I have to be happy all of the time. So allowing yourself for good mental health, to lean into all of your emotions, to feel your emotions rather than pushing them away, to allow yourself to feel them without judgment, and developing this emotional language, and then connecting with meaningful people, vital people in your life. So friends, family, it could just be one person, it could be two people, and then finding those colleagues, mentors, and trainees. And I think this one is really important. So you have your peers, you have your mentor, and then who do you have? Who are you pulling up behind you? Who are you training? Who are you meeting with? Who are you the mentor for? All of this helps our emotional self. And then developing our spiritual self, living out our spiritual disciplines, whether that is through mindfulness, through worship, through meditation, learning to express gratitude to others, reviewing our life's purpose and our mission. It's incredibly easy to get caught up in an activity trap, in the busyness of like, oh, I can't do this, I'm so busy. I think sometimes in today's society, we want to wear badges for the busyness of life. Well, my life is so busy, right? And to work harder to climb that ladder, and trying to hit that success, whatever that definition of success is, only to discover that we're leaning against the wrong wall, right? It's possible to be busy and even very busy without being effective. So developing this spiritual self, so we have a better understanding of where we are now, so that we can take the steps to get in the direction that we want to be effective. And then life beyond work. How are we living outside of our jobs? This is about prioritizing and making deliberate choices. So volunteering in a non-related field, maybe it's travel, maybe it's a hobby. Find life beyond work. This is one of my very favorite little sayings here, and I like to use this a lot in my talks. There's no such thing as work-life balance. It's all life. The balance has to be within you. And then being aware of our values and our guiding principles. You know, as I said, many of us, we can't fix the people we're caring for, but what we can do is be present. So being aware of what are my personal and spiritual and theological underpinnings. You know, how do I make meaning out of suffering and illness and death? And really examining what your intrinsic belief system is about, you know, about the assumptive world. Being aware of your own guiding principles is really about taking ownership of your values and beliefs. This is what helps each of us individually make tough decisions and navigate major changes in our lives. So last few slides, I want to talk about, you know, we're talking a lot about examining ourselves and creating this plan. These last few slides, I want to talk about learning to reframe unhelpful supportiveness, because we all have those people who are very well-meaning and who want to try to help us, but understand that they have good intentions, but what they're doing is not helpful to you at all whatsoever. And so finding out who's got my back. You know, we all need one person. We all need one person in our lives that right now, if you need something came up and you looked down at your cell phone, who's that one person? And if you don't have that, fix that today. Find that person, you know, ignore the naysayers, connect meaningful with those vital people in your lives, even if it's just one and two, and don't worry about the negativity and the unhelpful supportiveness. Connect with, and then there are also many resources to connect with needed support within the community. There are community-based resources, there are support groups, spiritual support, therapy, counseling. One thing that we do know, and research time and time again shows us, that the more we're connected, the better we do with these stressors in our lives. There was a study that was done in 2009 with nurses who were perceiving increased job stress. And those nurses with high social support from coworkers and supervisors were more satisfied with their jobs than the nurses with less support. So support in the workplace becomes significant, not only for high stress employees, but for all employees. So think about that, connecting with peers and connecting with supervisors and feeling that support. So if you're a supervisor, think about that. Think about the people that you are working with, the people who are working for you. And the more they feel supported, even if they're in high stress jobs, the more job satisfaction they're going to find. There was another research project that was done on veterans from Operation Enduring Freedom and Operation Iraqi Freedom. And it was primarily outpatient mental health services that these veterans were getting, but the veterans with PTSD reported a lower level of resilience based on the lack of support that they had, the lack of peer support. So again, just like those nurses, the more support, the higher resilience, the better they did with managing that post-traumatic stress disorder. So creating your own personal plan of action. This is one more sheet that you can use, that you can fill out. And again, very fluid, right? These are things that I want to focus on immediately. And then these are things that I want to work on long term. Set a time frame for you. Maybe you pull it out once a month. Maybe you pull it out once a quarter. And just take a look at that. Take at that and mark it up and make changes as we need to. So I thought we would end today with a grounding exercise to talk about how, just kind of put this all together. We've given a lot of, I know it's really quick to do this in about 45 minutes, but ways that we can create this personal care plan. Let's try a grounding exercise. So what is grounding? Grounding can help us reduce stress and come back to the moment and bring back ease and flow to our world. So these are things that you can do throughout the day. One of the things I like to do is tell people, I want you to relax your shoulders, lower your tongue off the roof of your mouth, relax your jaw, and breathe. One simple, easy thing you can do literally took us less than 10 seconds. And here's another grounding exercise. I would like you, if you're comfortable, to put away any other device you may be on. Just set your phone down for a minute. And I would like you to close your eyes and just start to focus on your breath, breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. And then feel your feet on the ground. And visualize roots at the bottom of your feet. The roots are growing down, but they're also growing outward. They're growing outward to interconnect us to others in this call, maybe others in the room with you. Connecting, those roots are connecting you with your coworkers. Those roots are connecting you, they're interconnecting with who you're caring for. Now bring your awareness to your trunk, your torso, your legs, your arms, your head. There's a rootedness in the earth. There's a rootedness in our loving and supportive relationships outside of our job, and that presence and that care in our job. And then bring that groundedness all the way up to your shoulders, to your neck, to your head. That groundedness in your cognitive ability, in your emotional ability to connect with other people and be present and help them in a way that so many others are just not able to do. Your special gift in coming alongside other people and giving them that space to be in that place of pain or sorrow and offering them that presence. And one more time, breathing in through your nose, breathing out through your mouth. And this final slide as we open our eyes, just a slide that talks about what we do for our self-care. And one last breath. Breathe in for yourself and breathe out for those that you are helping. Thank you so much, everybody. I know we have a few more minutes. Kim has some announcements to make, and we wanted to leave a few moments for questions.
First, I have to come back. That deep breathing and grounding was very helpful, Becky. I want to thank you so much. This was such a valuable topic and such useful information, and I really appreciate you making it interactive with our attendees. Just a little reminder, everyone, we want to think about the importance of being aware of implicit biases, otherwise known as unconscious stereotypes, as we care for others. A best practice is a person-centered approach where we view each person that we care for as an individual with unique needs and preferences. And of course, we treat them with dignity and respect, even when they're very different from ourselves. And as Becky reminded us, when it comes to culture, it's okay to ask questions. And we want to listen carefully and respectfully so that we understand all of our clients' perspectives, values, preferences, and culture. And in that way, we build trust and provide the highest level of care. So, okay, so now if you have questions for Becky, please be sure to go ahead and type them into the chat box. And before we go into that Q&A session, I just want to take a moment to thank our sponsors once again: O'Connor Mortuary, Care Choices, Hospice and Palliative Services, Caring Companions at Home, and of course, Alzheimer's Orange County. Don't forget about next month's webinar. Next month, I will be the speaker, and my topic will be activities that enhance engagement in dementia care. We also have a couple of non-CE webinars that are going to be very interesting coming up. One is on January 24th, and it's called Help, My Friend Has Dementia and a Gun. And the presenter will be James McCabe. He is the owner of California Gun Services. And then on February 21st, we'll have Guiding the Way, Navigating Assisted Living and Dementia Care for Your Loved Ones. So to learn more about all of our educational activities, you can go to www.alzoc.org. Okay, what else do I need to say? Nope. I think we're ready to go with the questions. So let me just give me a second, Becky, to open up the chat box and reveal our questions. And there we go. Okay, lots of compliments. Do you recommend any books and or companies online who have videos and other webinars on these topics?
I don't know of companies that are doing videos and webinars, but you have my email and phone number up there. I do have some great resources for some books and for some blogs.
Okay, great. I'll read a few of the comments. This was a great midday recharge. Such valuable information. The reminder to care for ourselves to be able to help others better. People are asking for the transcript. I think that you can view the video on our website. It should be up there soon. And you have the slides. People are saying how much they enjoyed it. Becky is the best. Thank you. Love the exercise at the end. Very helpful. Everyone's thanking you, and we don't seem to have huge
Mm,
questions. Thank you for your time. Great presentation. Just on and on. So all of the evaluations are wonderful.
Good. I do
Okay.
think this is very introspective. So a lot of this is things we just, it's a lot in, as I said, in a short amount of time, but a lot of things that maybe not necessarily questions for me, but just ways to examine and introspect and focus on yourself when you have a few moments.
One of our attendees made a comment. I learned in a psychology class that our first instinct as human infants is to cry for help because that is essential for our species survival, asking for help from others and social support.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you said something, Becky, about emotional language. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Well, just being in tune with understanding our emotional language, as caring professionals or as caregivers, we're very careful about how we interact with others in our word choice and how our words have an impact. Yet we don't always do that with ourselves, right? It's part of that self-compassion that we can really beat ourselves up pretty well, right? We're good at that negative self-talk. So being aware of our emotional language and not only how it affects our people we're caring for, but really more importantly, how it affects us because it does impact our role in caring for others.
Thank you, Becky. Another attendee is recommending a great book called Power of Pause by
Mhm.
Terry Hershey.
Yes,
Again, that's Power of Pause, Pause. I would also say Power of Pause, Paws,
that's
because
a
I
good
think
one too.
pets are good self-care. But Power of Pause is a wonderful book written by Terry Hershey.
That is a great book. I would recommend that as well.
Okay. The presentation was informative and professional. So it seemed pretty much focused on professional caregivers. Are there any words you want to give to family caregivers who have been in the trenches caring for someone, perhaps
Yeah.
for a long time?
I think this applies to everybody, and I would say especially for those of you who are family caregivers. That's the one person put in about the infants, and it's an instinct to cry for help. Utilize the resources that we have. I mean, Alzheimer's Orange County is one of the greatest resources that we have. They have a 24-hour helpline. They have support. They have professionals that this is what they do. And I think sometimes we are waiting for that rainy day to ask for help when we don't even realize we're in the middle of a hailstorm. So apply these same principles of self-care, positive self-talk, caring for yourself. And some of the best ways you can care for yourself is to utilize these resources. It doesn't mean that you're not caring for your person anymore. It means that you're utilizing the resources that are available to you to care for that person even more effectively.
Very, very good. Thank you, Becky. What are practice things I can do for a friend who's caring for a family member? Every time I ask if she needs help, she graciously declines.
Yeah, I think we see that a lot. Thank you so much, but I have this. Um, some of the things that small little practical things is ask. One time I was with a grieving family, and the owner of the mortuary came in and said, please let me know if there's anything I can do. And without missing a beat, the grieving widow looked at him and said, well, you can come and paint my house. So practical things.
Wow.
He was being the, oh, what can I do to help? How can I support? And she said, come and paint my house. My husband has died. Come and paint my house. I mean, she was tongue in cheek. I mean, she was joking when she said it. But that, think about that. What are some practical things that you can just do, that you can do to support that friend, that you can do that help that friend. Hey, I'm running to the grocery store. I'm going to go bring you this, or I'm bringing you that. You know, here's like those little practical things that rather than asking how I can support you, you're just doing.
Becky, that calls to mind a gentleman that we served a few years back. And when he found out that his wife had Alzheimer's disease, he's a businessman, so he took a business approach. He actually put a lot of things on a spreadsheet, from little things to big things. And he attached it to an email that says, my wife has Alzheimer's now, and these are some areas where we would love to have your participation. Please feel free to sign up. And so people signed up for taking her to the beauty parlor, taking her to lunch. People signed up for watching her so that he could golf. I mean, there were all these things, and it sort of served him well. So, I think the trick here is maybe if they're reluctant to say things that bluntly, you can suggest, what if I bring over a meal, or what if I pick up groceries for you?
Yes.
How would that work for you? So, yeah. Someone's asking about the two organizations, Alzheimer's Association and Alzheimer's Orange County, with respect to the helplines. So I will clarify that. The Alzheimer's Association has the 24-hour helpline. We have a helpline that operates during our regular business hours. So we're very lucky in this area to be served by two great organizations. So thank you for that. Anything else? Let me just take a look here. I think we're good, Becky. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. And I think that there's going to be, I know even just for myself, I really needed to hear this today. And I'm sure a lot of people agree with me. And I'll be putting some of these strategies into play. And so we really appreciate that. Everybody, as we get ready to end and exit the webinar, please watch for the survey that is going to pop up and fill that out. And then we hope to see you at a future meeting. And thank you all for your time and attention today. And thanks once again to you, Becky Lamaka. There's a reason why you're one of our most popular speakers. We truly appreciate you and all of your efforts. So thank you, everyone, for the beautiful job that you're doing. Take it to heart what you learned today, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.